This is The Coach, an AK experience with me, Anthony K, and Coach Hugh Jackson. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. I'm your host, Anthony K, and here is always the Coach Hugh Jackson. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Anthony. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you, especially in the evening.
Yeah. I want to kick things off. There's as always, there's so much going on in the NFL. We're getting close to the playoffs. People are fighting for seeds, home field advantage, a bye week. But I want to start with the one team that seemed to be rolling, right? We talked about they had an easy schedule and the Steelers were rolling along, 11 wins in a row, and they've hit a bit of a snag. Now, we talked last week a little bit about some of the injuries, but now we saw a loss to your former team, the Bengals, which probably made some people there in Cincinnati smile. But is this – now, I will say the Bengals defense looked much better against the Steelers the last game that we've seen throughout the season. Was this more the Bengals D or Pittsburgh's those injuries now mounting up? Because Ben doesn't look to be himself either.
I think it was a combination, I probably should say. But before I say that, I want to make sure that I give a shout out to Kevin Greene's family and pass our condolences. Kevin Greene was a tremendous football player. I got to know him. He was really he was coached by Marvin Lewis, so he came around the Bengals quite a bit. I got a chance to spend time with him. What a tremendous man, tremendous father, husband. And so we lost a good one, that's for sure.
I was going to ask you about that at the tail end, but it is important because, you know, he was 58.
Yes.
That's young, right? And our condolences definitely go out to his family. Heck of a football player. I guess you probably knew him more as a man. As a football player, I know was just phenomenal on the field.
He was.
It's
sad. I mean, because you get so afraid, you don't know if it was COVID related or was there some other underlying pre-existing issues. You just don't know. I mean, when somebody dies at 58 who was as talented and is in shape and took care of themselves, I thought the way he did, you just get concerned.
Yeah. And I don't know, is there any insight that you have yet on what kind of the causes were?
I hear it was a heart attack.
Okay.
But nobody has said how that came about. Was there a cholesterol problem? You know what I mean? Was there
right. The details. Yeah. Listen, I lost my father-in-law. He was 59, and the cause of it was heart failure. But once we looked into it, his body was riddled, right? Brain cancer, colon cancer. He had other things. So that's why it'd be interesting to see what it was, because 58's young when you're in good shape.
Extremely young. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. But when we were talking about the Steelers, when I said it's a combination of both, what I saw was a team that looked not like themselves at all. They looked disinterested in a very big game where they needed to send a message to the rest of the league. I'm concerned. Ben looked not like Ben at all. He looked a little old. Looked like he couldn't make the throws. He was either high or missing or late or all of that. They still don't have a running game to answer. Where I was really disappointed is watching the defense. The defense that had been so stellar, which was the number one defense in football heading into this game, could not stop the last placed offense of the Cincinnati Bengals and gave up 27 points. So there is a problem. They've now lost 3 games in a row. And I think Mike said it. They're not a very good football team right now. They got to figure out who they're going to be down the stretch here to kind of regroup themselves. And it's concerning.
When they were winning those games, a lot of people pointed to their schedule and they said, well, they're much like, the Patriots last year where they had an easy schedule. Not that any NFL game is easy, but in the grand scheme of things, an easier schedule. And that might have been kind of a little bit of smoke and mirrors. I always countered that by saying their defense is legit. And that's a defense that can kind of carry them through. And the offense didn't look right all season. I thought they were always missing something. And that, to your point, I always thought the defense would get them through like a game like that, because Finley, it's not like Finley went up and lit it up. I think he
Right.
threw 13 passes. That's not, if he has a big game and, they're just firing on all cylinders, you say, okay, they stole one there. But it's not like they were tremendous either. And to your point about Ben, and you're going to know this more than I, so hopefully you can shed some light. It looks, I don't know if it's the elbow, if it's the knee, what injury. It looks like he's hurt because, to your point, he's always been very accurate, right?
Very.
That's what I always hear about Ben. He's very and you're right. I saw him overthrow, missing running backs. He was missing a lot of throws where he normally, that's Ben. He's always going to make that throw. I know it's hard to tell by watching, but does it look like there's more to it there?
Absolutely, it does. I don't know if people remember, but there was a pregame segment to this game. It was on ESPN. They showed Ben before he ever went out to go throw in the corridor there at Paul Brown Stadium with a tennis ball in his hand and throwing to a coach, just throwing off to the right side. You do that if you're trying to rehabilitate something. You do that if you're trying to work through something. So I go back to your point. Maybe there's something there that we really don't know, but we all know the passer that we saw last night is not who Ben Roethlisberger is. So I think, it'll all come out here pretty soon. It has to.
Yeah.
But there's an issue there somewhere.
So with that first seed kind of home field advantage kind of being now out of reach, I think. I don't think the Chiefs are going to give it up. I know they're still fighting. Cleveland still has a chance to take over the division, but would they ever consider, if there is something wrong, do they rest Ben and just kind of get him healthy for the playoffs, or is he too much? Because I know him. He'll have an arm dangling off and he'll want to go in and play, right?
Absolutely.
But is it for his own good? Maybe do they sit him a game just to see if they can get him right?
You said it, Anthony. Sometimes you have to protect your player, and make sure you give him a chance to get back to where he was. I go back to earlier in the year when one time he didn't practice until Thursday. And he told Coach Tomlin, I'll see you on Thursday. And Coach Tomlin said, nah, we can't do that every week. He brought him on back in. Maybe they're at that place where he needs that,
Right.
where he doesn't need to be around till Thursday. Are these last two games very important? Yes, it is. Because even if they can't claim the number one overall seed away from the Kansas City Chiefs, to know that you'll play at home until you play in the AFC Championship game is also comforting too. So I think they're going to do everything they can, one, to bounce back, because I think that's what teams try to do as fast as they can. Two, they know they need to get the quarterback back on track. The week before it was drop passes. They headed into this game with the most drop passes in pro football. There wasn't drop passes last night. It was missed opportunities. So they got to go find that happy medium there. They got to get James Conner back. They got to make sure Ben is rested enough to make it through. But they're on a downhill, deal right now. They're not playing as well. They're not playing up to Pittsburg Steelers football. And that's really, and I'm talking about as a team. Normally you say one group. That was a team effort last night that didn't go very well. So
right. And this is the wrong time to be sliding, right? This is when you want to get some momentum heading into the playoffs.
This is when you need to get better. Yes.
Yeah. And so I wasn't going to ask you about this, but as we were talking about the team in focus and you talked about drop passes, I hear this. I've heard it a lot for the last 2 weeks, and maybe it's because they were losing. How do you feel? What's the inside the NFL, if I could, feeling about Juju going in, center field on the opposing team's logo, and he does these dances and he puts them on TikTok? Does that matter? Does anyone even care, or is that distracting from the team? Is it something for the opposing teams to get them more motivated?
Yeah, it can be distracting to the team. All depends on what the head coach's vision is of that, because obviously it's been, I'm sure, brought up. I think you've heard Mike Tomlin said he's going to speak now to Juju about doing that. So obviously it's more of an issue than we thought it was, because he had to address it and said he's going to have that conversation. It does rile up the other team, and I don't think you do anything to get the other team going any more than you already have them going. So
Right, like the last thing you want to do, right, is give them that bulletin board material, right?
Yes.
And you remember, I think back to Terrell Owens, right, on the Dallas Star, and
Yes.
they clock. And I get it, like it's not a respectful thing in the history of football to do. I think nowadays we're a little bit more easygoing about it, but
Right.
I always wonder, like, as a coach, do you say, hey, that's just, juju be juju, or do you say, hey, let's tone it down, let's not give them a reason to get
Right.
more pumped up for the game?
Anthony, I had one of the biggest showmen in football.
Yes, you did.
And Chad Johnson. And I really believe he did it for the right reasons. At the time, Cincinnati was somewhat of a dormant, and hadn't been playing good football. He brought a different passion and energy to the team. The team kind of followed it. We knew what the things he was doing. I kind of always knew I never wanted him to go too far over the top. But I thought it was important because it gave the team juice.
Yeah.
What about the Pittsburgh Steelers? Blue collar, just work. They're not about the show.
Yeah.
They're not about a dance in the middle of the field, or TikTok, or whatever all that is. That's not who they are. And so that's a different brand. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because to your point, there's one thing to have that swagger. It's another thing to make a joke out of it, I guess.
Yeah.
So
this is an individual swagger.
Right.
And I agree with that one.
Yeah. Hey, listen, when they were winning, no one seemed to care. But
even when they were winning, though, it was wrong because you knew it was going to come back.
Yeah, eventually. Yeah,
because
all I saw yesterday was they showed the clip of him dancing, and then he took a nice hit there, and they're just showing those two things back to back. It's like, it's.
Well, same thing make you laugh will make you cry. So.
Yeah, for sure. So from one team not doing itself any favors to another team not doing itself any favors, but this one in a different way. I hate saying tanking. I personally don't think, I hope not, that there's no professional team that purposely loses games to increase their draft stock. I can't believe as professionals, as men, you're going to go out there and purposely lose a game. But the Jets, who are on pace to, have the top pick, and a lot of talk about them losing for Lawrence, winning and kind of maybe costing themselves that first overall pick, help the Jags, who are also looking for a quarterback. But how do you see that? Like, I think you agree with me that no team's probably purposely losing.
First, that's the biggest point. You said it. No team or coach ever goes out to purposely lose, because you're not going to do anything to decrease your own value. You're just not going to do that. So that's first and foremost. The second thing I think you're saying, and I think it was in the newspaper today, where players from the Jets say they were very disappointed that their fans were disappointed that they win, because they're not worried about some draft pick. We're not worried about some player who may be or may not be on our team. We're worried about the people that are in this locker room. And the last time I checked, the quarterback was drafted in the first round. I think he was the second pick of the draft. So they're not sitting up there concerned about what's going to happen a year from now. These guys are trying to win. It goes back to what we were just talking about. So, no, I'm with the players. I'm with the coaches. I've lived through that. I know what that is. And so you're not there for that reason. No coach or player tanks. They never have, and they never will. The game is too violent, and the game is too, strategic and purposeful for any player to think I'm going to go out there and not give my best.
Because listen, I've heard this time and time again. I've experienced myself. If you don't go out there and give it your all, that's actually when you get hurt, because you're laying back. And when I hear, I get it. A fan base, they want their team to have the best possible players, even if that means, hey, this is a lost season, so let's just lose games. But if I'm Sam Darnold, if I'm that offense, if I'm the Jets, right? Again, I'm playing. You're playing. Some people are playing for contracts. Yes. You're playing just for the pride of being a professional. Coaches are playing to keep their jobs, right?
Yes.
If you don't win as a coach,
that's right.
It doesn't matter. You don't have a job, and that's why I find it frustrating when I hear that fan base says, hey, let's, this next great player is coming. Let's lose for that person. And then the other part that we don't talk enough about, I think, is the culture that it creates, right?
Yes.
When you start losing games and you get used to losing, it's really easy to take another loss, right? And then you look at a guy, I'll bring up Brady because someone brought this up, him screaming and slamming his helmet against against the ground, 15 years into his career. Yeah, because he's not used to losing. And no one, when you built that inside you that you always win, that's the culture you want to build, right?
You don't want to build the other culture, because in order to unbuild that, you have to change so much, because that seed could run in your organization. And the next thing you know, that becomes the expected experience, because that becomes your experience. You have nothing else to pull from, nothing else to grab from. So losing is okay. And how you lose is even becomes okay. And so I think it's really important. And I say this all the time. I don't think anybody's built to lose. And these young men who are high alpha males, when you get them to losing like that, they're going to find their wins the other way. And normally when they're finding them the other way, they're very negative.
Yeah.
So we have to be always on guard for that.
Yeah. And it's definitely not, it's, I say it all, I think I argue about it. I keep saying, I don't think we talk about it, but I don't think anyone can actually go out there purposely wanting to lose. Now, you might say, hey, I hope I get the top draft pick when the season's all said and done, but I don't think you go out there with the mentality to lose.
Right.
And I think you're going to see it with kind of my next topic, because at the beginning of the season, the NFC East was losing a lot of games, and now they're starting to pick it up. And yesterday, your old quarterback in the Dallas Cowboys looked pretty good. And they're back in the conversation. They're going to give Washington kind of a run for their money. Was it a good game? Or did you see something from the Cowboys that is sustainable that could, let them finish the season off strong? And maybe, because that's the only way they're getting in the playoffs, right? Is if they win their division. Do you see something there?
I do, because I see a veteran quarterback who's won a lot of games. And so anytime you have that, you have a chance. And Andy has won a lot of games in his career. And I think he's now feeling comfortable in his environment with the players that are surrounding him. They're playing a little bit better on defense. They're running the ball better on offense. And it was interesting they did that without Zeke Elliott.
Pollard looked good,
yeah,
but
really good.
I think he was also getting some good blocking, which we haven't seen.
You just said it. So they were making some plays. So I think they have the taste of there's a chance.
Yeah.
So they're going for it. They got 2 games. They got to play Washington, I believe, one more time themselves. So they got a chance to go make a run here with 2 games left, and that's kind of unheard of. Now, there's been teams that are 11. You look at the AFC North, I get it. But, boy, that division, like you said, they hadn't won a lot. So now all of a sudden here it is, and the teams that were at the bottom of the barrel got a chance to really go jump the teams that all of a sudden looked like they were taken off there for a second. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the previous point, because here's a team that had every reason to pack it in, right? Our offensive line is having some issues. Zeke isn't having a typical Zeke season. We lost Dak early. Dalton got hurt. There's every excuse in the book. They could have just packed it in and said, hey, let's focus on next year. And they kept chipping away. And now they're in the conversation again. So I love it. Like, hey, when Dallas is good, things are good. It's interesting. It makes it interesting.
America's team, right?
Right, yeah. So from your quarterback to my quarterback, Mitch Trubisky has looked like a different player the last 2 weeks, let's call it. From week 1 or week 2, kind of what we saw, that Mitch to this Mitch. Do you see, he seems like the same player, but the passes just seem to have a little bit more zip on them. They seem to be a little bit more accurate. Now I know it's just a short, right? It's two games, but what's the difference? How can it be so different from those first couple of weeks to the last 2?
Sitting down.
Yeah.
You sit down and you have your livelihood threatened or look like it could be taken away or look like you could end up someplace else than the place who coveted you from the beginning, and you get that chance again. I mean, most people don't get the chance again. He's got to nail this, and he has thus far. He needs to continue to do it, as you're saying, over these next couple of games and show that he does have what it takes. And sometimes I think people need to understand, and I'll still say this about Mitch, he's still a young player.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he didn't play much in college. He came into the National Football League. He became the starting quarterback maybe a little too soon, and he wasn't ready for it. And there were some growing pains, and now he's been through it. And how do we know or don't know? Maybe he's ready to come out the other side of it now, you know, because now he's seen it and he's had that fear of what it could be like without being that guy shown to him. So here's his chance to make a redemption, because the Chicago Bears got to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
You know, either they're going to pay this young man or they're not. They're going to move on. This is a huge decision. I've always believed a bird in the hand's better than a bird in the bush. You know, so if he's there and you believe you can continue to get him to where he needs to be, you got to keep the player and give him a chance.
Yeah, and I think people forget about how little he played in college.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, that sophomore slump that almost every quarterback has, his, I think, was worse because he didn't have that kind of college experience to kind of fall back on a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It also doesn't help that I think 3 of the last 4 games, they've been able to rush, you know, or have a running game that they have not had all season.
Right.
And I think that probably helps the rest of the offense too, right? When you can run the ball.
No, it does.
Yeah.
You want to help a quarterback, have a good run game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Another quarterback, and this one was one that's now sitting, Carson Wentz. He came out, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but kind of said, hey, I need to be a starter. Do you like the confidence of him coming out and saying, I deserve to be a starter, I'm good enough to be a starter? Or is it now's not the right time to do it? You know, now's the time to kind of support Hurts and say, hey, he's the starter now. I'm going to do what I can to help him.
I love the confidence because that's who he is. You don't want to change who he is, but he does need to support Jalen Hurts. He's a starting quarterback. I understand where Carson's coming from, because I guarantee you, and again, this is one man's opinion, if you had a conversation with him, there's probably some things that he would enlighten us all on about why it didn't go good for him and why it hasn't worked. Now, has Jalen Hurts come in and did some dynamic things and give them more of an opportunity? Do they look better on offense? Yes, they do. But Jalen Hurts wasn't the starter. Jalen Hurts didn't have that pressure. Jalen Hurts didn't have every defense preparing for him and already have a notebook on him and know what he does and what he does like and what he doesn't like. So, you know, the new shiny object is not always the best. And I'm not voting and saying Carson should be back in there. There's something to injuries. There's something to the pandemic. There's something to practice time. There's something to a chemistry between the head coach and quarterback in calling plays that I've seen. It sometimes just doesn't work. And it wasn't working for them. And now it's working for, you know, the head coach and this new young toy that he has. But this new young toy can run.
Right.
Carson Wentz could run at one time too. He got hurt. The game changed for him.
Yeah.
You know, did they adapt for him? That, you know, there's so many questions I know I would have, you know, and I think that's what you're seeing from him. I see frustration in those comments, you know, that he wants to be a starter. He doesn't want to stay if he's not going to be the starter, you know, because I think he feels like he's earned it. You drafted me for it. You paid me for it. Let me be it. If you're going to take it from me, then that means you don't think I should be there. So I think that's where that's coming from.
Yeah. Now I'm going to go way off into left field.
Uh-oh.
Because I want to get into, I know we're going to get into our finance part, but I heard something. And if I'm wrong, please tell me I'm wrong and we'll just move on to the next piece. But I heard that you're a bit of a Lakers fan.
A little bit?
I heard a little.
Right now, there was a screen over my shoulder where they were presenting my 2020 championship Los Angeles Lakers with rings. And it just warmed my heart. I want
Well,
Jenny Buss and the crew. They're getting the love they deserve today.
as you may or may not know, I am also a Laker fan, and I'm going to watch it later. I'm recording it, and so not that there's anything to spoil. I know it's going to happen. They're going to get their rings, and they're going to go out and defeat the Clippers. But when I heard you were a Laker fan, I was like, oh, I knew you grew up in LA. I didn't realize you're a Laker fan. Obviously, the season is starting.
Yes.
Other than them obviously getting their rings and becoming by far the best basketball franchise ever in the history of the NBA. Any words? What do predictions for this season? What you're looking forward to? Repeat.
I'm looking for a repeat, and I think we will. And I am obviously I'm a Kobe Bryant fan through and through. Had a chance to meet him. I have my own personal signed jersey from him, and I'm very thankful for that. I'm very thankful for the time around him. Magic Johnson, just so many Laker greats that I've had an opportunity to say hi and those type of things with. But boy, this team and the team that they put together, Jenny Buss, Rob Pelinka, I think it has a chance to repeat.
I'm with you. I think what they did in the offseason, their team is deeper, it's younger, they're a better shooting team. I think this is a better team than last year. So I'm agreeing with you, and not just because I'm a Laker fan. From an analyst perspective, I just think they've set themselves up to win again this year. And I'll tell you, my work moved me to Arizona, and I did everything I could to get that transfer to LA. Yeah. And those 3 years that I lived in LA and I was able to go to games and see, those were the best
greatest.
Because I grew up, you may or may not know this, I grew up in Toronto, and we didn't have a basketball team when I was a kid in the 80s. And it was either you were a Laker fan or Celtics fan.
Right.
And everyone I knew was a Celtics fan because they were closer. And I just went, I don't like green. I'm going LA, and I've been a Laker fan since. I think maybe I'm going off topic here. I think Michael Jordan's the greatest player of all time, but Kobe's my favorite player of all time. Right. And I make that distinction. It's, hey, I get it. Jordan's probably the GOAT, but if you can get me to cry in a mall when I got the news, right, last year, I was in a mall and I got a text that, and I saw the news start popping up about and I'm crying in a mall. That's someone who's,
yes,
I didn't know him other than, just him as a player, as after all the stuff that he did. But, that's my guy, and forever will be my guy. So I knew that when I heard you were a Laker fan, I said, we got to talk at least a little bit about the Lakers.
Yes.
So repeat, we'll pop some champagne when they win.
Or tequila.
Or yes, some tequila. Absolutely. I got it. I shouldn't bring this up because we're, this is for the world to see now, but it is very difficult to get it in Canada.
No, it is.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to figure out a way, but we will get some. And, I actually was trying, you don't know this because it didn't happen, but the first episode that we did together, I was going to try to have a bottle here waiting, sitting on the side. I couldn't get it in time, but I do. Luckily, I lived there long enough. I have some friends. They're gonna help me out and ship me some.
Awesome.
So we will then pop some tequila, absolutely, because is there anything better?
Not better than Grand Leander.
And it's organic, and I'm trying to live a healthier lifestyle.
Don't panic, it's organic.
I love that. I love that, by the way. I when I saw that the first time, I was like, that's the perfect thing. All right. So now we got to figure out how we're going to pay for all this tequila.
Absolutely.
So we talked about our 8 revenue streams every week.
Yes.
Last week we talked profit income. This week, interest income. Is it as simple as it sounds, or is there more to it?
No, it really is. And that's the reason why I wanted to get into it, because I think so many people understand interest income better because people have money in a bank, have money in money markets, those type of things. But interest income is the interest earned by an investor's money that he places in an investment or project. So for instance, I take money to the bank, I put it into a interest-bearing account, and then we know the interest rates are really, really low right now, but that money sits there and it compounds and normally makes more money every month. Now, if I take some of the principal out, then the interest is going to go down. If I let the money stay and every month I'm able to compound interest, I start to gain more capital, more principal per se. And that's what interest income is. So you're loaning out your money to a particular institution. Normally, when you do that, you want it to stay for a while so it can grow and you can maximize the interest process. Some people do, some people don't. The people who are smart, who make money, there's people who get interest-bearing accounts and they live off the interest because they have enough money that when they get the interest payment every month, and you can decide how you want it. Do you want it monthly, quarterly, or yearly? I mean, you can do all kinds of things when it comes to that. But that's what interest income is, and people need to understand it and learn it.
And it's more of a long term, right? It's not, you're not going to put it in and, a year later make a ton of money. Like, this is a longer term kind of plan, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's say if a person has, I don't know, $500,000, $100,000, whatever it is. And let's say somebody, and you can find places that are going to pay you sometime between 2 and 6%. Okay. And you let that, and maybe that's all the person needs for the year, the extra. And then maybe you take the principal out. Some people do that. I know some people that truly live that way. But what you said is normally what it's all about. It's about longevity. It's about having a plan for 5 years and then being able to take the interest that was made, not have spent it, and then invest it into something else.
Right. So, and this, we're going to talk about a different one every week, but really, if you have, 5 or 6 or 7 of these 8 streams, right, you're not necessarily having to live off the interest, but if the interest is a portion, and then your profit revenue is a portion, and your royalties are a portion, right, and then you put those together and you say, hey, I can live off where all the money's always working for me and I'm living off this other stuff, right? That's the perfect scenario.
Anthony, that is the perfect scenario because you are truly making money, the people who have made money, when your money's making money for you. When you're sleeping and you're not worried about, there's nothing you had to do. You didn't have to put more money in to make more money. You have money coming to you every month. Now, whether you decide to spend it or not, it's totally up to you. So you said it. You want to play, and I said this a long time ago when we started this, maybe 2 or 3 of these streams. You don't need all 8. No one is going to be efficient at all 8. You got to find the 3 or 4 that fit you and your financial profile, and then you have to maximize those. And the key to it, as you just said, it's being able to collect from those particular streams every month that gives you some form, and we'll get into this term here pretty soon, I'm sure, some form of residual income so that you're not touching your principal, your earned income per se. And that's when you know that you're on your way.
Yeah. All right. So we're 2 down. I feel like I'm going to come out of this. I'm going to probably have a ton more questions, but if I don't come out of this in better shape, I've got time. My kids are my twins are 6. I got 12 years before I got to pay for university. So that's why we're doing this, right?
I think I will share with the listeners and with you. So there's I think we understand that the money game is starting to change per se. That paper money is kind of beginning to go away. Digital money is kind of where it's at. Cryptocurrency, those particular things. So I have partnered with a group called Voyager. It's on the Voyager app. It's a crypto asset. They have their own coin. It's called Voyager, but they have 50 different coins that they use on their platform. But the coins have their interest bearing.
Oh, okay.
So you hold the coin. If you hold the coin for a certain amount of time, or if you have a certain amount of that particular coin, you earn so much interest. They have a USDC, which is just like a bank, like having money at the bank. And you have to have, if I'm not mistaken, please don't hold me to this, I think it's 40 or 50 VGX coins to get 9.5% of USDC in your account. And USDC is 1 to 1. So it's just like having a bank account. It's like having that interest-bearing account that we were talking about at the bank.
Right.
But it's
a much higher interest, obviously. Yeah.
There you go. Now, the difference is 9.5% of Voyager interest is not like 9.5% of bank interest. It's not apples to apples that way. But what it is right around 4.5%. Well, you couldn't get 4.5% from a bank anyway.
What are banks ballpark on average right now?
It's not even 1%. Is 0.00011 something. It's really low right now. Oh yeah. And so,
but that's also part and parcel, right? Because of where the economy is.
absolutely.
You know, they're giving out money at 0.1%, so they can't really pay back at a higher percentage, right?
Right. So then go look at the other. So where do you maximize your potential with money? That's why you start looking to these other avenues of where you can place money. And people get afraid because they don't understand cryptocurrency. It's very volatile. But there's a thing called USDC that's just like a bank. And they have it there. Use that. Use that.
Because that is the fear, right? With, you know, when Bitcoin kind of came out, there was these ups and downs, and
very volatile.
You know, you're putting your real money that you worked for, and you're not into something you're not familiar with. And you know, we've talked about this before too. Change, the unknown. We're very hesitant to dive into those things
because we're used to normal.
Right.
Normal is I'm gonna put it in the bank. Nobody ever taught me about cryptocurrency. You know, you're talking about I can carry my phone around with me, and I have $250,000 invested into cryptocurrency, and it's on my phone. You gotta be kidding me. You know, that never used to happen, but that's the world we live in now. Yeah. And if you don't understand these things today, then you're behind.
Yeah. And the change happened quickly, because I'm 44. My dad raised me to, if you don't have the cash to pay for something, like the cash, you don't buy it. And in my lifetime, it went from that paper money in hand to, I can't remember the last time I actually had a bill in my hand, because I pay everything through my phone, through my watch, e-transfer. Like, there's so many ways, unfortunately, to spend your money without actually having money.
That's why everybody says this is $1 million.
Right.
And people don't even know it. Is how you use it, because you probably do everything on it.
Exactly. Too much, probably.
Too much, absolutely.
All right, so that's interest income. Next week we'll cover one of the other revenue streams.
Sure.
The last topic isn't a fun one, and I'm going to try to give you as best I can two sides of the story, and you kind of tell me what you think. So obviously we talked about Colin Kaepernick taking a knee a couple of weeks ago in the first episode, and why he did that. You know, it had to do with police brutality. So when we're talking about this, look, the closest I can tell you that I've experienced anything like this is when I mentioned earlier, I lived in Arizona. I also had a lot of sun, so I was a little darker than I am today. And I was mistaken for Mexican. And in Arizona, they give, you know, Mexican guys a bit of a hard time. So I got pulled over. I want to say I commuted from Scottsdale to Tucson about 2 times a month. And I got pulled over every other trip. And the second they saw my last name, they kind of asked, well, what kind of last name is this? Because it doesn't look that Mexican. And I had to explain to them, it's Greek. They, you know, they looked at me a little funny, but they let me on my way. Not once did I ever fear that if I did something wrong, I'd get shot, right? it never even crossed my mind. And I never did anything wrong. I was always, nice, whatever. I feel like I'm a personal person. I was a sales guy, so I had that little bit of salesmanship to me. To then hear stories from people who, have to have conversations with their kids. Or I'm going to ask you, maybe you've had to have it with players because they've got some money, they got a nice car, they're driving in a city maybe they're not familiar with, to be careful. One, that's the one side of the story. What is that conversation, and how does it feel to have that conversation? And then I'll get to the second part, or the other side.
Right. It's frightening, but you have to have the conversation. People have to understand that we're in a time where a lot of things, there's heightened issues and it was even before now. I mean, let's just be honest. It's
No.
just we all just see it more, because of this cell phone we've been talking about. It can capture things now, and it goes around the world so fast, so everybody can see it. But these things have been going on for a while. The first thing I would say is that we have to have the right mindset when approached by authority. Because if you don't, it could escalate. And let's just be honest, you can't win. How are you going to win that if it turns negative? You don't win, okay? And we also know what the ultimate thing is on that side is you can lose your life.
Right.
So I'm not going to do anything. I always advise my players, my kids, you need to be as transparent. You need to be as respectful as you can be. Now, if somebody is just, coming at you the wrong way, it can get, we know what those situations look like. Well, you can't escalate the situation because I'm going to say it again, you're not going to win. Yeah. You're not going to win in that environment. So we have to be very careful. Now, on the other side of that, we do need to train our police better. There needs to be better training. There needs to be a better understanding. There needs to be a better approach to what they're trying to do. But we need them too. I mean,
right.
without anybody to police chaos and disorder, it's going to get worse. So I'm not against police. I'm against what they have done in certain situations, because all policemen are not bad, or police women are not bad. But there's a few bad people that can make it all look really bad.
Right.
And so those who we know there's signs. I think the police department have to deal with those people differently. I think your mate who rides along with you got to deal with that particular person differently. And I just think that's the way we're going to change this. But to say we don't need police, to say that we don't need to respect police, we all respect authority. Everybody respect their boss at their job. Mm-hmm. We're taught biblically, we respect our mother and our father, so there is, without any order, there would be chaos everywhere. So we can't let that happen. But somewhere we got to find where this gap has been, where the police have stepped above and beyond what the call of duty has been.
Yeah, I get a lot of flack for this, but I'm going to say it. There's wrong and right on both sides. There's a middle ground, right, where we have to find it. And so, and that's why I'm going to bring up the other side, because you talked about it a little bit. And the argument when I say, well, look at this guy get shot in the back. And then the other side is always, well, I'm just giving you their side. He had a criminal record. He resisted arrest. Why didn't he just listen? When you hear stuff like that, do you respond? Do you just shake your head? Like, I don't know if you experienced, I know you like I said, grew up in LA, right? Like I'm assuming you've heard at least.
And I get very disappointed, because that still doesn't give a person a right to shoot somebody in the back.
Right.
That's give the person a right to do the things that have happened. It's so easy to go point to people's negatives really quickly in a time of trouble, but how do you know what that person was doing? Let's walk this down and see what it was before you say, well, the person he didn't listen. She didn't do this. He should have did this. He should have did that. My question is, what would you have done if you were in that situation? And it becomes, when you're able to put people back into those situations themselves, that's when they really see it.
If they're open to seeing it.
If they're open
to see it, because some are just, hey, I refuse to see it, and there's nothing you could do there. Absolutely. But I think that's right. Like, I think it's, if you were in that situation, how would you react? And if you reacted the same way, would the outcome be the same? And if the answer is no, it'd be different, well, then there is something that we need to fix. And the reason I bring that up is because I hear it so often that, well, why'd they resist? I don't know the answer. They had a criminal record. Well, what does that have to do with today? We've all made mistakes in the past. It doesn't mean, it has to affect your next step. Because, and then, the last part is, and this is the other one that I hear way too often is, well, the amount of times that it's happening is less than other crimes. And how come they're not protesting, the violence in their own community? Why aren't they protesting, these other things? And I want your perspective on it, because that's always the one that I try to say from just common sense, but I always want to get someone else's opinion too.
You can't make common sense of some of these things. It's not even common sense, the things that have happened. The people who say, boy, it's this culture or it's this situation, like I said, they have never been in that situation. The other thing I hear is people say, well, I would never be in that situation. You're right, you wouldn't. You're absolutely right. And so you have to understand that. But so we're asking you to put yourself in their shoes, their fear, and what they're going through, and how they've been maybe talked to, reprimanded, or wherever that is. And what would you do?
Yeah.
And people can never, they don't want to go there. But what you're saying, and I'm not trying to get around the point, is I have a hard time when people don't want to have a conversation about what is right. They always want to have a conversation about what has been normal.
Right. Let's
talk about what's right. Is this right? Is this the right way to do things? Is this the right way things should be happening? As soon as people say, well, no, well, okay, then we don't need to talk about what this guy did 10 years ago. We don't need to talk about how it came about. Was it right for this man to get shot in the back? Was it right for this person to get beaten? Was it right for somebody just to spray an apartment, because you thought that there was a drug dealer in the house? Okay, well, the guy's running through the neighborhood and you think he's running because you think he stole something and there's nothing in his hand, and you shoot him, kill him. Are you kidding me? Is it right to put your knee on a guy's neck that you're going to arrest and you have all these officers around you? It's not. So to me, that's common sense.
Well, I always ask the question, if it was your brother,
oh my God,
if it was your brother, how would you react? And I see a change in the face, and you can tell, well, is it different then? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you brought up, you mentioned this, so I want to go back to it because you said culture, because that's the last piece that I hear is, the culture, the music, it's about violence and drugs. And and that's precipitate, that's making it worse. And I said, well, hold on. My thing is, well, hold on. That music, that, those movies, they're coming from a place of life, right? This is what's experienced because of what happened, that this is happening. And that's, it's this vicious cycle. How do you break it? Well, you change it. You change the conversation, yes. Right? And that's how you say, listen, I grew up in the 80s. So in the 90s, I was a teenager. And I grew up in the hip hop culture. I played, not that this means anything, but I played basketball, and I was one of two white guys on my team, and we listened to hip hop, and I loved hip hop, and I listened to Tupac, and I listened to Biggie, and I listened to,
yes.
all, and I'm not going out and doing anything bad. It's not the music. It's not the movies, and that's the part that it drives me nuts, because I always say, hold on, guys. It's not, the movies and the culture is a piece of history. It's, I grew up a certain way, or I saw something, and now from those life experience, trying to get out of that is by making movies and music. Right. And you can't use that as an excuse. You can't say a police officer has the right to shoot someone because, you grew up in LA, because he listens to NWA. Absolutely. Right? You can't put those two things together. And that's the one that just blows my mind.
Our Caucasian brothers who listen to AC/DC and all that music should be, put in those same situations. And we don't feel that way. So that's not the, because you brought culture, I always say, like, that's not. Because that's the way people see it. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, I know we're putting some stuff on the table. We've been transparent in everything we've done. When people see Black, they see it as power. They see it as strong and maybe not as good. When people see white, they see flowers and brightness and things should be. It's a black and white issue, and people need to understand that. And that's just the truth. That's not a culture. It's not a music issue.
No.
It's not that. There's a bigger issue that's deeper than this, and people need to understand that. I hear more people trying, per se, to have these kind of conversations now.
Yeah.
I would still say to people, keep digging and be transparent. Because if you don't, you're just floating around the conversation.
Well, and I'm trying to be as open and ask you as many uncomfortable questions as I can, because I hope that people listen to this and they see a white guy talking. No, let me rephrase that. I don't want them to see a white guy talking to a black guy. I want to see two people who are having a conversation and saying, "Hey, this is right.
Yes,
this is wrong. And if it's wrong, let's change it."
Absolutely.
And if we can, and that's why I thought this was so important. And that's why, when I first approached you and I said, this is a piece of I want to do every week, as uncomfortable as it will be, right?
Yes.
To have the conversation, to, think about people listening and what they're going to think. At the same time, it's so important that you and I and everyone who's, has the ability to have these open, uncomfortable conversations has them. Because the more that we have it, the more that we keep it in front of people, right? That's the only way anything's going to change, right? Is because if we forget it, right? We talked about this, I think, last week. If we forget it and we put it in the back of our minds, it doesn't change.
I think people have to understand the fear that minorities feel and why. And I think minorities need to understand and truly understand and feel while our Caucasian brothers and sisters have fear of us, and truly understand that. And to me, if we can start with that conversation first, you'll get somewhere, because you really then have to say who you are, and they have to hear who you are. I didn't say they have to accept who you are. Sometimes it's not even about accepting, but it's hearing. Because if you hear and you understand just a little bit, maybe there's certain things you wouldn't say. Maybe there's certain body languages you wouldn't give off. Maybe there's certain feelings you wouldn't have if you understood the person better. And I mean, that's from both ways. That goes both ways. That's where the issue is. And we got to quit walking into situations with all these pre-existing thoughts that this is the way this person must be already.
You set that off, because if I go into a situation and I feel, hey, coach is going to come at me because he's a big, strong black man, I better put my defenses up. Well, guess what? Yeah, we probably are going to have a confrontation, because I'm going in expecting a confrontation, and it's funny. I'm going to leave you with two really opposite stories, because I didn't get it as a teen, but I was in the car with a friend of mine, and he's Bayesian, very dark. He was driving. We got pulled over, and I saw him. He was sweating. So I said, relax. Like, it's cool. Like, you were doing 5 kilometers below the speed limit. We're good. He goes, yeah, no. And he's sweating. And so the officer comes in, starts asking him a bunch of questions, kind of hard on him. And he said, why were you going so slow? It's very suspicious that you were going slow. And he said, well, I'm just driving him to his house, and it's late. And, I was doing 5 kilometers under. So anyways, he said, gave him a warning and left. And as he drove away, and, we were 2 blocks away from my house, I said, why are you sweating? Why are you so nervous? He goes, because it happens all the time. I get pulled over all the time. And I purposely don't speed so that it won't happen. And it happens, and I'm scared. And I thought, wow, I've never been scared. And then I think back now, well, fast forward, but back from today. And I was driving from Denver to San Francisco. Long drive. And I just got out of Colorado. I was driving through Wyoming, and I was going fast. I will be the first to admit I was doing maybe 90 or something in a 65 or something, maybe 70. And I got pulled over. And I don't know if you know the Wyoming police, but they got the chin straps in front of the chin and the big hats, right? And so as he's coming to my car, and it's the first time I ever went, oh my God, he unbuckled. Right? He unbuckled and had his hand kind of just his gun just out of the holster. I'm like, oh, why are they doing that? Just first time ever. He gets to my car, asked me a couple questions, says, you know how fast you're going? I'm not going to insult him by doing the accent, but when I tell my friends, I do try the accent. But so, you know how fast you're going? I said, no. He said, I clocked you at 88 miles an hour. And me being me, I looked at him and said, not even thinking, right, how crazy this is. Too bad I wasn't driving a DeLorean. I could have gone back in time and driven by you slower. But he laughed and said, you know what? That's funny enough to get you out of a ticket. And he let me go. And then I thought back to my experience as a passenger. I was like, he never could have got away with that. And that's not right.
That's what the difference is.
Because that was funny. I thought that was a really good joke.
Oh, yeah. No, I think that is real.
Yeah.
What you just described is real, and it happens every day. But it happens every day the other way.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just, that's what we have to stop. You know, there's something about when a police approaches a car and has been a man of color, that thought goes off, you know, that something bad can happen. That's just what I see and what I hear. And I just think we can, and again, the people, they are happening. I'll be the first to say, there's been some people who've handled it the wrong way too, that they have been bad people. And they are, you know, the officer are in a threat, you know, so I get that too. So we all have to do better.
Right. Yeah, because it is. Listen, let's not take away from the police, right? They are one of the toughest jobs where they are in harm's way. And I get it. You got to be careful because, you know, your life is on the line too. So that's not to take away from it. I'm with you too. We definitely need the police, but there's obviously some thing that needs to at least be improved upon. So I'm going to absolute last part of this that I want to ask you, because you're in Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. I would assume most officers, I hope, know who you are. Does it ever cross your mind, you know, like I don't know if you get pulled over very often, but does it ever cross your mind, like, I got to be careful? Or do you get the, hey, coach, right? Oh, hey, everything okay, coach? Like, do you get that?
I've gotten the hey, coach, you know, more so than anything. And that is privilege. I hate to say it, you know, so there is a form of privilege that has been extended to me. And sometimes I do feel bad because of it. And sometimes I'm happy about it because it gets me out of certain things.
Right.
But at the same time, I think if somebody can come to my car with that kind of respect and love, I'm going to give it back. You know, and I just think if you approached every situation that way with respect and love, then we would have a lot less of the killings and the unsensible killings that we've had, you know. But I think it does have to work both ways. Yeah. It just does.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. I know for me, it's important, but it's never comfortable. But that's why we're doing this. Like, we need to have these uncomfortable conversations. So I thank you for being kind of so transparent about it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go watch some Lakers.
Absolutely.
And any last words before we let you go until next week?
No, I just can't thank you enough for what we're doing, because we are putting it out there. And I think you have to. And I like first to even dig deeper, because I think I want to have an impact, just like you do, on people and thoughts and direction and what people think is good. And maybe we can just spur some thought, you know, for people to maybe look at things just a little differently. And it might make a huge difference in saving somebody, helping somebody, giving somebody a better opportunity at something. So that's why I really enjoy this time on Tuesday.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it doesn't need to be a big change, right? I think if everyone makes, on both sides, right? If everyone makes a little change to come together, that'll make a big difference.
Everybody says that, though, and come together. And we got to, and to me, that's going to be one of our. What does that mean?
Yeah. Okay.
And I think people got to understand, because when you say that, people, what do you mean come together? So you're going to come together to me on this side of the line, or what does that mean? You know, we're going to come together and do what? You want me to think like you, look like you, see you? We need to come together. Means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
All right. Well, we'll definitely talk about it in the upcoming weeks. And I'll leave it with come together means, for me, accepting people for how they are. So that'll be a good conversation to have. So again, thank you so much for your time, Coach. This has been the Coach and AK Experience. This has been The Coach and AK Experience, part of the Sports Fluent Network.